welcome to episode 5 of Killer Instinct. This is the final episode, the grand finale. As always, I'm your host, Avery Smith, and if you're new here, this is my crime YouTube series where I talk about serial killers. And I have 4 episodes already up on the JHS Creative Communications channel, so go check those out if you haven't already. We're all a little sad about this being the last episode, but if you love the crime content and you want more, you can head over to JHS Creative Communications on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and listen to my classmates' podcast called Behind Closed Doors. I guest starred on their last episode on the Menendez brothers, so if you'd like to check that out, go ahead. So this episode is a little bit different from my others just because this one is the final one. So I actually watched an episode of Dahmer, the Jeffrey Dahmer show on Netflix, and then I also watched a Ted Bundy film called Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile, and I'm going to just talk about those and how they compare to what actually happened in real life. So to start off, I'm just going to quickly summarize both of these shows, and then I will talk about how I think they compare. So the Ted Bundy movie starts off with Ted meeting a girl named Liz in a bar, and she actually becomes a really big part of the movie and of Ted's life. I would say that this is partly like a romance story between those two. So right off the bat in this movie, it shows Ted getting pulled over for running a stop sign, and then the cops see all of his killing objects in the back of his car, like the rope and the gloves, the mask, the crowbar, those types of things, which we actually talked about in episode 1. So if you haven't watched that, you can head on over and watch that on JHS Creative Communications as well. Another thing that I want to point out is that throughout the whole movie, Ted is so stood on the fact that he's innocent. He's telling everyone that he did nothing. He's so innocent. They're just pinning this on him because it's easier to pin it on someone. And he just acts completely innocent the whole time when obviously it was him the whole time. So next, Ted gets this kidnapping pinned on him, and he goes in a line with a bunch of suspects, and the girl who he kidnapped, he did obviously kidnap her, she picks him out of the group, and so he has to go to court. And during his trial, the girl is like, I know it's him, I'm for sure it's him, and Ted is just trying to gaslight her into the fact that it's not him, even though it was. And she says that Ted said to her, if you don't stop screaming, I'm gonna kill you. So that was a big deal in this clip. They talked a lot in the movie about Ted's Volkswagen Bug, which we also talked about in episode 1, and how it made him kind of stand out because people knew his car. Ted was ruled guilty of aggravated kidnapping against this young girl, and he was sentenced to prison. At this point in the movie, Ted has only been sentenced for kidnapping, but then a homicide detective comes in and asks him if he's ever been to Colorado, and Ted says no. After this, Ted's lawyer actually leaves him because the detective had gas receipts from Ted in Colorado. There were killings that happened in Colorado, and they were also trying to pinpoint those on Ted. Ted was then sent to prison in Colorado for killing this young girl, and there's speculation about the death penalty now. So the whole time this is all happening, Liz is still with Ted, and Ted keeps calling her, oh, this is not true, I'm innocent, I would never do this, blah, 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 blah. And she's just starting to lose hope. Obviously, she doesn't want to be with a killer, but she's holding on to the little piece of hope that he could be actually innocent. So while Ted is having his trial in Colorado, he actually sneaks out during the break in the trial, and he jumps out a window and runs away. Ted obviously gets found again and locked up again, and Liz goes to visit him, and she leaves him for good. After getting found and locked up again, Ted actually escapes again, and he goes all the way down to Florida. This is when the Chi Omega murders happened, which we did talk about in episode 1. If you're unfamiliar with the Chi Omega murders, basically Ted snuck into a sorority house and he clubbed and murdered 2 girls. He also raped one, and he tortured 6 other girls. Ted gets caught for these crimes, and he once again calls Liz and tries to defend his innocence, but Liz is not having it. During this trial, Ted is charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of attempted murder from the Chi Omega murders. This was the first nationally televised trial, and it said that Ted was on a gag order, which basically means he couldn't say anything. and they told the very, 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 very gruesome details of what Ted did to these girls, and the whole time he's still trying to protect his innocence, even though they showed the bite marks on one of the girls' legs, and his teeth matched the bite mark perfectly. So at the end of the movie, Ted obviously gets ruled guilty, and he's also ruled for the death penalty. Right before he gets executed, Liz actually comes to see him, and they're talking through the glass. And she's basically asking him, just tell me you did it, I know you did it. And he's still trying to defend himself. No, I didn't do it, no, I didn't do it. And she's tell me, how did you do it? And they're on the phone because you have to talk through the glass. And he writes hacksaw on the glass because it's all soggy. So she knows that he killed the girls using a hacksaw. After that, Liz leaves and Ted gets executed, and that is the end of the movie. Okay, now we're going to talk about the Dahmer series. I actually only watched the first episode because I didn't have time to watch 12 hours of episodes. But the first episode was actually very interesting, and I think I'm going to want to watch the rest of the series. So my second episode of the series was on Jeffrey Dahmer, so if you haven't seen that, you can go watch that. If you watch the first and second episodes, which were on Ted and Jeffrey, it'll probably be easier for you to relate and know what we're talking about because I talked a lot about them, obviously. So the start of this episode, Dahmer meets 3 guys at a gay bar and he buys them all drinks. He's being very flirty. We talk about this in the Dahmer episode where he lures all his victims in from the gay bar, and he offers these boys $100 if they come back to his apartment and pose for art photography. One of them accepts, and his name was Tracy, and he goes back to Jeffrey's apartment with him. Jeffrey immediately acts weird, shuts the door and locks them, and he asks Tracy to put handcuffs on for the pictures. Tracy obviously senses that this is weird, and he asks to leave, but Jeffrey says no. Jeffrey makes Tracy go to the bedroom with him to watch a movie, and he ends up pulling a knife on him. So Tracy actually tries to seduce Jeff to make him like him so then he can not kill him and Tracy can leave. But this just ends up leading to Jeffrey asking if he can listen to Tracy's heartbeat. And then he's laying on his chest and he says, "I'm gonna eat your heart." So Tracy tries to make a run for it, and he gets to the door but he can't get it unlocked, and then him and Jeffrey start fighting, and Tracy ends up actually escaping and running down the road screaming for help. The police then find him and they take Tracy back to Jeffrey's apartment, and they ask Jeffrey for the keys to Tracy's handcuffs. The police come in and they can obviously smell the disgusting dead bodies that Jeffrey has in his apartment, but Jeffrey just says it's pork. As the cops are looking around for the keys, one of them finds them in a drawer, and when they open the drawer, there's also a stack of Polaroid pictures, and these pictures were pictures of the dead bodies and the people that Jeffrey had killed. Some of them were decapitated, they were all naked, it was disgusting. Obviously, Jeffrey gets arrested, and his parents actually get called, and his dad comes down to the station where he is then talked to by detectives, and they tell him everything that they found in Jeffrey's apartment. Then the cops go back to Jeffrey's apartment building and they tell everyone they need to evacuate for the crime investigation. And this one neighbor lady is really mad to the cop because apparently she called them a bunch of times and told them that she smelled funny stuff, but they never actually listened to her. And then the episode ends. So my overall thoughts, I thought that the Ted Bundy movie was really interesting, and it was kind of nice because we learned about the trial history instead of just the gruesome killing details the whole time. So I thought that was kind of nice. It was a lot easier to watch. It was a lot easier to watch than I originally expected. I thought it was going to be really hard to watch. There was only a couple scenes where I had to cover my eyes and hope for the best. I thought that the Dahmer episode was also really interesting. I wish that I would have gotten to watch more. I just didn't have enough time. But I thought it did a really good job of portraying how he lured in his victims and how easily, really, he got them back to his apartment. So as far as the Ted Bundy movie goes, I do think that all of the information was fairly true. I never saw anything that I was that never happened. The only thing that I literally never read about was his girlfriend Liz. I didn't even mention her in my episode, and I looked it up, was his girlfriend's name actually Liz, all these things, and they said, yeah. it was. And so I guess that's my fault for not mentioning her in the first episode, but she was a huge part of the movie, like I said, and that's the only difference from my episode and this episode, because I did not talk about her at all, and in the movie they talked about her literally the whole time. The part that was like exactly the same as my episode was when he got pulled over in his Volkswagen for having like the trash bags, the crowbar, gloves, masks, rope, all that thing, and then he gets arrested. I had that basically word for word in my episode, so that's good. I'm now going to show the clip from the movie Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile on Netflix where Ted gets arrested.
As soon as I graduate, trying to save for that ring, so if you could find it in your heart to let me off without a ticket, I would really appreciate it.
Another thing that I talked about was how Ted like appeared very, very charming, and in the movie they actually had like, they showed girls that were sitting in on the trial. They were like, oh, I think he's innocent, he's just so handsome and I love him. And it's like, he really was apparently that charming that these girls were saying that they think he's innocent just because of how good looking he was. He was played by Zac Efron, so I don't blame them. I'm now going to show a clip from the same movie showing a bunch of girls talking about how attractive they thought Ted was.
That many of the onlookers are women, young women.
Every night when I go home, I get very scared and shut the door and lock it. But, you know, he's also really dreamy.
I'm not afraid of him. He just doesn't seem like the type to kill somebody. I try to imagine myself in his place and imagine what he's feeling, and I wonder whether he did it or not.
The young women themselves aren't too sure what it is that attracts them to the trial.
I do think this is, in an underlying sense, a sexual attraction.
Why do you do it?
I don't know. I guess I love him.
So the first thing I want to talk about from the Dahmer show, I actually wrote this quote down, which is something that I found in my second episode. And it says, Jeffrey Dahmer would typically meet his victims at gay bars and lure them back to his apartment with the promise of money. Boom, we obviously saw that, or I saw that in the first episode. He met 3 boys and he offered them money and one came back to his apartment. Now I'll be showing a clip from the Netflix series Dahmer.
Can I buy you a drink?
Both is. Oh, well, should we let this gentleman buy us both a drink? That's awfully forward.
Honestly, I have like no differences for this episode. Like everything that I watched lined up with everything that I read. So in my episode about Jeffrey Dahmer, I talked about his hernia surgery and how Jeffrey's parents claimed that it like changed his brain. They also talk about that in this episode at the end when his dad is getting told everything that Jeffrey did, and the detectives ask him like, do you have any reason, like any idea why he would do this? And the first thing his dad says is he went through a hernia surgery, which actually he thinks like altered his brain.
I think he was 4. He had a hernia operation. And he was never the same after that. And I don't know if there was brain damage, for, too much anesthesia. It's haunted me.
So I thought that that was really interesting, and I'm really glad that they put that clip in there because it kind of like solidifies the fact that that actually could have had something to do with it. Another similarity, which I talked about and the show talked about, was when Jeffrey would keep body parts in the freezer. It actually says straight from the show, there was a human head in his fridge, 2 plastic bags in the freezer, one had a human heart and one had male genitalia. And then they also found 5 skulls in his bedroom. And there was a 57-gallon vat of acid in his bedroom that contained 3 human torsos that were trying to like get the skin melted off. Just disgusting. And then another clip in the movie, or the show, actually said that the detectives knew that he was a cannibal because he had like marks on his hands and like marks on some of the body parts that show that he cooked the human parts, which is crazy. So to conclude my episode, I thought that both the show and the movie were both very educational and everything seemed correct. I thought that this was like a really easy way to learn a lot about the serial killers. If I would have known nothing about those two, this would have been very educational and it would have actually taught me a lot. Like I stated earlier, the Ted Bundy movie seemed to be like half a love story of him and Liz, and then like half just like the trials. And then the Dahmer show, at least the first episode, showed like the whole process of Jeffrey luring people in and killing him, even though they didn't kill Tracy. So I'm giving you guys some homework. I want you guys to go watch what I watched and experience the shows for yourself. So the first one, again, is called Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile, and these are both on Netflix. And then the second one is The Dahmer Show, the first episode. If you love learning about crime, I would highly recommend these. I think that they were very, very interesting. I just want to say thank you to everyone who watched my show. It means a lot to me, so I appreciate it. Thank you so much for tuning in to this final episode of Killer Instinct. I hope you guys enjoyed this little different format, and I enjoyed making these episodes. Please make sure to like and subscribe to JHS Creative Communications. And again, if you would like more crime content, check out Behind Closed Doors on JHS Creative Communications on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Thank you so much for the support. This has been Avery Smith on Killer Instinct.